Hi, it's Lisa with an update on what's going on in my craft room these days. In the last couple of videos I've shared with you some paper crafting and sewing. I'll give you a quick update on sewing, and today's video is mostly about knitting projects. When sewing, I had a quilt that I had the string piece blocks all laid out, ready to sew together. I have sewn those together. I have a completed quilt top. I have the backing fabric washed, and I've put that project aside. Before I sandwich the quilt and quilt it, I have some other sewing to do, and that is working on masks. If you haven't heard, there are many of us sewers who are making masks, and there are different uses for these. I am awaiting word from a friend who had asked me, as a nurse, who had asked me about getting some masks, and she works in another state, and to see if she still wants them. And I sent her a couple to look at. She liked them, but I just need to know whether she wants them, and if she doesn't, I'm going to be looking at where I can distribute these locally. There are tons of videos and instructions online already about masks, but I may do a short video to address the issues that I've had in making them and procuring materials and some suggestions and things. If I don't do a video, I'll at least do a blog post later in the week on that. So that's where my sewing time is going these days, is to mask making. I do, though, knit when I'm watching TV. I knit maybe an hour to an hour and a half a day at the most. I'm not a prolific knitter. It bothers I used to crochet, and I love crocheting, but it bothers my hands. The twist of the wrist movement is greater with crocheting, and I just can't crochet more than about 5 minutes till my hands hurt. But I can knit. I still can't knit a huge amount at a time, but I can do some. So it'll take me, for a sweater, it'll take me 2.5 to 3 months. And I meant to look up before I started this video when exactly I started this sweater. I think it was in January. I just don't remember if it was early January or late January. I think it was at least late January. So I've done this one fairly quickly for me. I want to share with you this project that's nearly completed. The next project that I'm going to be starting, that I have worked out my own pattern for, and then I have some new yarn that I'll just, we'll take a quick peek at the yarn. This project, I followed the pattern. Now, those who know me knitting knows that there's no pattern I can't modify, alter, or just pretty much look at it and then discard it and do my own thing that ends up being completely different. I like doing that kind of work. I guess it is technically design work, although in many cases I'm just modifying something somebody else has done. I don't ever publish these. These are just for my use. In this case, though, I followed the instructions. This pattern is called Whip It. It's from Anka something. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm going to put the name on the screen so I don't mess up the name too much. It's a beautifully written pattern. When I downloaded it and printed it out, I was intimidated, I got to tell you. This was a lot of instructions, and I wasn't quite sure what all she meant by some of these things. But as I read through it and made notes and worked through the pattern, it worked. And I followed it, everything in here. There was one place I made a minor mistake, and I was able to work around it. But just a very, I can't even remember now what it was. It was just something very, very minor. But I followed the pattern until I got to the sleeves. And I made one minor change with the sleeves. But otherwise, I did it. And the reason I did this and really, really followed the pattern, I liked it. But also, this is a top-down sweater. I did 3 new things for me in this sweater. Top-down, never done top-down. I also had to do short rows. And down the bottom of the front requires short rows. And she gives you a link to the to a video that you can watch on doing short rows. And I tried the magic loop. So those were new techniques to me. A top-down sweater has the advantage of when you finish it, you just cast off your last bit and tuck in your threads and you're done, typically. I'm going to have to do one extra step with mine because of the alteration I made to the sleeves. But it's a completed garment when you finish it. It also has the advantage of, as you're working on it, you're able to try it on and get an idea of the fit. So you get the top made, and then you can see how long you want to make your sleeves and if there are any other alterations that you're going to make to it. It also has the advantage of letting you determine how much yarn you put in it. So if you, in this case, I had bought this yarn 2 years ago. I don't typically keep much of a knitting stash. I make mostly sweaters, and so I need to know how much yarn to buy. So I can't just go into the shop and say, oh, that's pretty yarn, let me buy that and I'll make a sweater out of it someday, because how much do I end up buying? But I really loved this yarn. It is from Universal, I think. It's called Papyrus, and it has, it's mostly cotton with silk mixed into it. It's just a wonderful feel to it. It's not super, super soft. I mean, it feels soft, but there's a little bit of a nubbly texture, but it's just, I just love it, and I've really enjoyed working with it. It doesn't have this, because of that nubbiness, it doesn't have a super smooth texture. I think in the design of the pattern, which is an easy 4-row repeat, it looks really good. In the stockinette and the ribbing, you can see that nubbliness, and my stitches are not as pretty as they would be in other yarn, but they're not as even. But it's still, that's just the texture of it, and I think it's really, really pretty. But I bought this 2 years ago, and I knew I wanted to make a cardigan, and so I think I bought 10 balls of it. And when I started this, I thought, okay, I'm going to do a top down, because then I can add more or decrease. Well, I could have put 2 more balls of yarn in this and made this a tunic length, but it was getting heavy enough. I just felt like, since it was a spring sweater, that it would get to be too heavy if I did that. Now, I intended to make this last year. The first year I bought the yarn, it was too late in the season, so I put it off till the next year, and then I just wasn't in the mood. And so this year I was really proud of myself for getting started on this in the winter so I could have it ready to wear here for early spring. Well, it is nearly the end of March. Yesterday it was 80 degrees here, and it promises to be warm. We're going to have a couple of cold days. It promises to be warm again later in the week. And starting at 5 o'clock this evening, we are on a 30-day stay-at-home order for our state, which is necessary, completely agree with, but where am I going to wear my sweater unless I wear it around the house? So I think this is going to be a fall or a next year sweater is really what it's going to amount to. But fortunately, it's my favorite color. If you could see the walls of my downstairs of my house, they're painted this color. I love this color. It's my favorite color, so I am sure it will still get lots of use. And hopefully in the next video you can see it completed. The pattern is designed to be, the back is kind of a high hip length, and the front it comes down longer so that it flares a little bit in the front, and that's where those short wrists come in. Now, what I did to alter this a bit, or what I did to change it, and the reason why I changed it. Notice the sleeves are not nice round sleeves. I'm going to have to seam the sleeves. That's not typical with a top-down sweater, I don't believe. The reason I did it that way is I already knew I don't like using double-point needles. But, you know, that's one option. The other option was the magic loop, and I keep hearing it referred to as the magic loop. So I asked the owner of our local knitting shop one day, I said, do you sell the magic loop? And she looked at me kind of funny. And after I said, I'm going to watch some videos on it. She suggested I do that. Well, imagine my surprise. The magic loop is not a thing. It's not a type of needle. I thought it was a type of needle. It's a type of technique to use with your long circular needles. So I tried the magic loop technique, and I can do it, but I don't like doing it. In fact, I think I like using double-pointed needles better than doing that. So for anybody who's ever tried to get me to make socks, told you I wasn't going to make socks, really not going to make socks now. But I just didn't like working in the round on something this small. I don't like either of those techniques. So what I did was use the double-pointed needles to work myself out of this underarm area to where I had this, where I could spread it out enough, and then I could work back and forth. So I will have to seam my sleeve. And with this pattern, I could do that. It was easy to make that adjustment. And the only other thing I'm doing is making my sleeve slightly shorter than what the pattern had. It was going to be really, really long sleeves if I didn't change that. So that project is nearly done, and hopefully in the next video you'll get to see me showing off my sweater. I got to do it on the videos. I'm not going to have anywhere else to wear it. All right, so that's that project. Now let's talk about the next project that's coming up. This is going to be with Noro yarn, and I got this a few weeks ago. I'm preparing for being at home more. This is called, it's Geishi, and it's called, or Geishi, I think, and this is color number 3, color number 3. It is, I don't know how well it's showing on the camera, but this is more a royal blue and a smoky kind of blue and this tealish green. And you can tell I like blues and greens. One of my knitting friends kept kind of sort of directing me towards the pink one that I had in my hand, and the pink one was really pretty. But I just love blues and greens. So this is the one I decided to make a poncho out of. I had a pattern picked out from Ravelry, but I ended up not even purchasing the pattern because I was altering it so much that there wasn't much point in doing it. The poncho that I'm going to make is a big rectangle. I've done this before with ponchos that ended up sewing together a little bit differently, but this one is just a big rectangle. As far as I can tell from the pattern, it starts at the bottom, you work your way up to the neckline, and then you separate your stitches so that you're doing one half and then you're doing the other half, and you come back together again in the back and go all the way back down. Because what you have is a rectangle with a slit in the middle for your head to fit in. And you can wear it with the V this way, or you can turn it around the other way and have a bateau neck. So that's really all it is a rectangle with that hole in the middle. And the reason why I decided to do my own pattern, the Ravelry one was really pretty, but it had this really elaborate pattern in the middle, and then the rest of it was just stockinette. What I wanted was some kind of a lacy edge on it. I wanted this to be more of a summer weight poncho. For our weather, that would probably mean late spring, early fall kind of thing. Maybe something you could wear through May here, or start wearing in September. This yarn comes out very, very light. Here's a swatch of it that I did on a size 8 needle. I tried 7 needle and an 8 needle. I liked the size 8 needle because I don't know if you can see here, but you can see through this even in stockinette a little bit. And I want that. I want the openness to it. And this is super, super light. So I wanted that lacy edge. And then if I did the lacy edge, I didn't need as much in the middle. So I needed a different stitch pattern in the middle. So I was completely changing everything. So I'm just making my own. That means working up sort of my own pattern. And let me show you how I do that, because I've done it before, and the way I lay things out. My best friend in knitting are these books from Barbara Walker. There are 3 of these. The original treasury of knitting patterns that I actually have in hardback that was given to me by the lady who taught me how to knit. And it was published, I think, in the late 60s. This was published in 1970, the second treasury of knitting patterns, and there's a third one. The third one, they're charted, and they're not the kind of charts we're used to today. I wouldn't necessarily recommend the third one, but the first and second ones are fabulous books with all kinds of knitting patterns, and I use these. I have also the Japanese knitting stitch book, and I use those for just about everything that I make. If I don't have a pattern like the Whippet pattern, I'm in here, and even when I do, a lot of times I'm in here finding a substitute for something. If I find a stitch that's too complicated or too wider, narrower, whatever that I want, I'll find a substitute in here. So I really love these books. And so what I did was I went to this looking for something to do on the edge, and I found, let's see if I've got it marked, this one. It's called Open Shell Edging. And it's this pattern here. Hopefully you can see that. And so I started making up a sample out of some scrap yarn. And I loved how it was working and how it looked. About halfway through I thought, this isn't going to work because I'm making a rectangle. I've got to have a scallop going this way on this side, and I've got to have one going this way on the other side. So what am I going to do? But I really, really liked it. So I finished the sample. And I thought, okay, how can I make this work? So I took the pattern that was in the book, and I just rewrote it for the other side. And what I did was basically flipped it. So everywhere that it said slip or knit 1 or purl 2 together, I reversed them. So if it said knit 1, I did purl 1. If it said knit 2 together or purl 2 together, I did knit 2 together. So I just sat down, took the pattern, and wrote it out by hand with everything in reverse. And it worked. I can't believe it worked. But here's the sample that I did for the right side that has the stitches. This curve is going to go around the right way. It's just a reverse. And the only thing is it has to be one row different, where certain stitches are on the right side of this pattern, they're on the wrong side of this one. So I'm going to be off one row as I go proceeding through this, but it will, from the left to the right, but it will work, I think. So I'm excited about being able to put that kind of edge on my rectangular pieced garment. So there'll be those on each end. There'll be some stockinette stitch, just the plain stockinette stitch. And then what I decided to do in the middle is I needed something that didn't take up quite as much room, and also I didn't want something super elaborate. So I found another pattern in this book called Eyelet Waved Rib, and it's this one. And I'm going to do 2 repeats of it, which will actually create 3 columns of design. And they're, again, very, very simple design that will go through the middle. And the way this design works is you work your way up, and as I said earlier, you split off, I believe, that's why I'm going to do mine, put all the take part of the stitches on holder and part of the stitches knit the right side and then come back and knit the left side. So I'm going to have to split this design, and I think that can work when I get to that point. So anyway, I have a plan for this, and the way I do this, I've done this before with patterns, is to take, whether it's somebody else's pattern or my own kind of cobbled together design, is to create a little chart. And my version of a chart is just to write down all the stitches that I'm going to be doing in each row. And I have it divided. This is the open shell edging on the left. And I took the pattern, and there's a lot of repetition here. This looks complicated, but it's not, because there are many of the same rows over and over again. But whereas she will say rows 3, 5, and 7, repeat row 1 or something like that, I just copy them over and over so I can quickly look at this and see what I'm doing on each row. I could chart it, I suppose, but I'm not that good at charting. But the only difference in many of the rows is how many stitches go in between some of the design elements. Where's my swatch? It's this. It's the stockinette that you're building. So I just have the left side typed up, then how many stitches I'm going to knit in between in stockinette, or knit or purl. I have one row that will have a knit in the front stitch to create that little, well, you know, the design where the knits stitches are more prominent. And then the middle, how I'm going to do the middle, and then the same thing over on the right. So as I follow a row across, it will tell me what to do. Now, mixing patterns like these two together work really well, particularly if you are using patterns that have the same number of rows in the repeat or a multiple of them. So if this is a 20-row repeat, ideally I would have picked an edging that was, say, a 10-row repeat, and then I would just done 2 of these for every one of these. I didn't do that. I picked one that I think it's 16 rows. 16 rows of this and 20 rows of this. So after the first set, I'm going to be off. I'm going to not be doing the same row here as I'm doing here in my little chart. But after you've done a couple of repeats, it's not that hard for me to keep track of it if the pattern is simple. And these patterns are really simple. They are just yarn overs, knit 2 together, or combinations. They're not complicated patterns. So, so I can do that kind of thing, and especially since the garment that I'm making has no fitting to it. It's just a rectangle with a hole in the middle. So that's my design here. I haven't even finished filling this in. I haven't proofread it yet. I just printed out enough of it so you could get an idea of the way that I'm going to go about doing that with that Noro yarn. And lastly, let's look at the new yarn that I just purchased from my local yarn shop. I went ahead and got all she had of this. It's Malabrigo, one of my favorite yarns. The color is Chameleon, and it's Dos Terras. I don't speak Spanish. But anyway, that's the yarn. It's a beautiful yarn. Typical of Malabrigo, there's a lot of difference between these, and what you usually have to do with Malabrigo is a lot of alternating your color, your rows, even when you're using, in theory, the same color for each one, or you'll get I did a sweater one time where I started working on it, and it looked like the back was going to be more black, the arms were going to be more green, and the front would have been more purple, and noticeably so if I hadn't started alternating the balls of yarn. So that's what I have of those 4, but 4 is not going to be enough to do a whole lot. I went ahead and bought one of these. This is color reflecting pool that goes with it really beautifully. And I'll probably end up having to get more of these when I decide what I'm going to do. So probably sometime in the next couple of weeks before we get maybe a chance to get stores reopened and things, I'll do a swatch and kind of guesstimate how much yarn I would need to do a sweater. I'm thinking like a 3/4 length sleeve cardigan. That's something I don't have. I've made a lot of cardigans. I have a short sleeve one. That short sleeve one I wear a lot. I probably should do another one. I have 2 short sleeve ones that I wear a lot, and I have long sleeves, and I've got pullovers and stuff. I have a 3/4 length pullover, but I don't have a 3/4 length cardigan. So I may do that with this yarn, because although this is wool, it doesn't feel like it's super heavy yarn. So, but I most likely will need at least one more of those. So before those sell out, I may get some more solid to mix with it. That's what I've got to work on eventually. So I have a lot of yarn to work with as I get time to knit, and I'll be sewing and knitting. And if you tune in to me for paper crafting things, I do hope to get back to paper crafting. I just feel like the masks and things are a little more of a priority right now. I have a scrapbook page. I have the stuff laid out. It's been on my table for a couple of weeks and I haven't touched it. So I do hope to get back to doing those things very soon. I miss them. So the procuring of food and all the extra cooking, and it's spring with outdoor stuff, there's just so much to do. I thought I'd have a lot more, I get all kinds of things done around the house being home more. No, I don't seem to be getting as much done. I also think the news and what's going on, it's, for me at least, I can get caught up in it and I'm not as focused as I should be or feel like I normally am. And so, but these kinds of things give us a really good distraction and a productive distraction from what we're doing. Because what we've been told is stay home and watch Netflix or do whatever. That's the way to help. So we'll stay home and knit, and that's the way to help. So thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I appreciate any constructive comments that you have. And if you're not already a subscriber to my channel, I would love to have you subscribe. Thanks again. Bye.